That's also why, not to get on that tangent, but just to briefly mention it, why I dislike when people are like, how are they going to function in the real world? Because people don't realize that all their intricacies and particular ways and things that they like and jobs they select and things they choose not to do or participate in is them accommodating themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. That is living in the real world.
Yeah. I'm like, you know how you're like, oh, I don't like my stuff touching.
Yeah.
I don't. It's like, that's accommodating. You know how you're like, oh, I don't
Yeah.
hold hands.
Yeah. Or how you flick your pen or you tap your foot when you're in a long, boring meeting. And yet we expect a first grader to sit still and keep your eyes looking at the teacher and your feet flat on the ground. But we can't do the same thing. Like,
And you walk away from conversations that bore you or you don't enjoy or you cut them short or you're in your mind playing something else because you don't want to hear it. But when they say, right, because again, we think about that filter they don't have yet. And
yeah.
so they're just like, stop talking. Or I don't like that.
Hey mama, are you feeling like you're walking on eggshells around your little one? Does every day feel like a battleground from breakfast to bedtime? You're not alone. If meltdowns, sensory sensitivities, and communication challenges are turning your days upside down, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Sensory Savvy Mama, the podcast for moms raising neurodivergent little ones. I'm your host, Victoria, and I get it. I've been there. The endless research, the frustrating appointments, the feeling like no one understands what you and your child are going through. Here, we ditch the cookie cutter advice and embrace the power of understanding your child's unique sensory needs within the context of your family. We'll dive into practical strategies, expert insights, and real-life stories to help you create a calmer, more connected family life. Because you deserve to feel empowered, not exhausted. Let's ditch the overwhelm and discover the joy of raising a sensory kid in a neurodiverse family. You ready? Let's go. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Sensory Savvy Mama. Today's guest is Dr. Destiny. She is an IEP coach and special education consultant. She is also a late diagnosed autistic and ADHD mental health professional and a non-attorney special education advocate. She is also the mother of 2 neurodivergent learners on IEPs, and she has been in the mental health field for over 15 years. She grew up in a family of teachers. Her sister's a teacher, her mom is a teacher, and even with all of that background, she still confronted some big challenges in the American education system. And we talk about it in this episode. And that can feel like, well, if she can't do it, then who can? And similarly to Lisa Baskin, who we heard earlier this month, actually, they started a podcast together, which you should check out if you need help with IEPs right now. It's called the Neuroaffirming Village. Anyway, go back and listen to that episode if you didn't catch that one. That's another good one. Again, so much of this is learning from our experience and people wanting to change how things are done. And we talk about this, some of the things that we see as professionals that's happening and that's considered normal. That doesn't feel normal for you as the parent on the other side of the table. And what you can do, there's some tips in here on what you can do to show up to the IEP meetings and have a better understanding of where you need to be, how you need to advocate for yourself. And if you need help and not to go through that journey alone. Dr. Destiny Huff is an IEP advocate and she works in all 50 states. So if that's something you're looking for, definitely check out her website and there'll be links in the show notes below. I hope you love this episode. It was a really fun conversation. It took off and we ended up having to circle back on a couple of things. So I hope you enjoy it and let's jump in.
I would love to hear this. I'm borrowing this term from my mom, but my mom always says, what's on your heart right now? What's the big thing that you want to talk about, or what's been the thing that's been coming up most recently right now for you?
I think that's so difficult because it's a lot going on in the world.
Yes.
Politically. There's so many things. Yeah, so I think one of the things that comes up a lot being ADHD and supporting families is seeing how a lot of my parents I support are starting to realize that they're autistic or ADHD. And they realize it because of the treatment they are getting from the school. They start to see they need accommodating. And the school is just like, you're an adult. And I have one parent, and she has a child that has high support needs. And she pretty much had a horrible experience with a team a few years back. And ever since then, she's been very specific. And she'll say, they'll go to make changes in the document. And she's found her voice of being, I want to see it on the screen as you're typing it in. Because she had meetings where they would say, yeah, we're going to put that in there and we'll send it to you. And then they send it, it's not in there, and then turn around and we have to schedule another meeting. They're like delaying it. And I've had a lot of conversations in the past year about accommodating. And I think that I have the benefit of being a professional because I'm a mental health therapist. So when I request accommodating, I feel like I get more respect because they feel like I'm not just being, I don't know, the word my sister uses is aggy. Like, I think that's just something I think is like parents who may or may not know if they're autistic or ADHD and how to support themselves during the process. Because I think that's something that, like I was just telling someone the other day too, I do typically, if I can avoid it, I do not schedule anything on days I have my own kids' IEP meetings.
Oh gosh, no.
Because
No.
I'm like, I just don't know. Even though we have a team, they know I'm an advocate. So they even will email me and say, hey, I'm just putting together the draft. Did you have input already before I even send you that?
Yeah.
But you just don't know what you're walking into.
No.
And so I'm like, I try as if I can to make sure that I have nothing that day. And sometimes things happen, like an IEP meeting gets rescheduled and I end up having an IEP meeting on the same day as my own IEP meeting. And I have to do some like major self-care in between. Or my son's school, one of his teams has a hard time starting on time. We're never going to start on time. And so I'll have other stuff. And then I'm like balancing that client, my own child, because I'm like, I need this meeting to finish because my husband was able to meet during this time, but I also don't want to let my client down. So I think that was just taking care of yourself during the process.
I think there's two big things that I've seen that come up from this. And one, as sitting at the table as an OT, as one of the team members, the parent who comes in, who is confident and is able to regulate their nervous system, gets a way different response than the parent who comes in and is not confident and is really emotionally involved in their child's IEP. None of this is whether they're right or wrong or what they're asking for.
Right.
But it is amazing and terrifying to watch a team respond to a parent system nervous regulation and either support them or eat them alive.
Yeah.
And I remember talking with one of my superintendents who was really great, pushed a lot of inclusivity in a really affirming way in our district and changed a lot of things. But I remember her saying, I never know which way you're going to go, if you're going to support the parent or us. And I was like, it's not a us or them. This needs to be a round table. This needs to be a collaborative dialogue. There isn't an our side versus their side. Like, we need to start having children in the IEP meetings if you guys can't like hold it together, because that is our focus, right? And we have very different perspectives and ideas on what that looks like as the parent or the teacher or the school administrator. But at the end of the day, like, what is best supporting this child and the unit that, like, the ecosystems that they exist in? And that is so incredibly hard to keep that as the focus of IEP meetings.
But what you said is so valid, though, because sometimes as an advocate, I get like a cringe feeling when some of the school team may be nodding along. Yeah, she's on our side. And it's not your side. It's that I'm in agreement with what you're saying. And I feel like my client, which I wouldn't say it this way, but I feel like they are so emotional about that specific thing that they're not hearing what you're saying. But thankfully, all of my parents know that I'm not siding with anyone. I'm there for the best interest of the child. So I've never had a parent, because I always check in right after the meeting. I've never had them be like, I felt like you weren't on my, it wasn't like that, because I always start out like, I know you and dad were disappointed by the conversation on this. And I wanted to give you more context about why they were saying what they were saying and I was saying what I was saying. Usually I can do that in the meeting. The team will let me speak, but I always try and add just that understanding, and they'll be like, I know. It's rarely where they don't get it, but I always can get like a cringe feeling when the staff is like, yeah, I'm not on your side.
No.
You're just right in this scenario. Like this is
This
what's
is
best for the child.
right.
Yeah. That, and you want to be like, now I want to take it back a little bit. Aaron is really coming from a place of, I don't know, is that what's best for my child?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. It's hard because you're not there at the school with them. You see them before going to school, and all the emotions and dysregulation that happens or doesn't happen going to school. And then you get them after school, and you get the communication from school. And that's your viewpoint, which is like looking through the peephole of your front door. Like, you don't really know what's happening out there. You think you can see what's going right on, but there's still a lot of other stuff that you can't see. And it's really hard to feel like I have to make a decision for the best interest of my child, and I don't feel like I know all the things. And also, we know, especially for some of our kids who are really good at masking, who they are at school versus who they are at home is a very different person, because school is not a safe place for them. And so they can perform and they can mask and they can be this good student for so long, and then they get home and it's the letdown of all of it. And so that's so hard if that's only what you're seeing. And then so often in those scenarios too, when moms are advocating or parents are advocating for more support because they're seeing that meltdown at home, the school can so quickly flip it and say, that's not a school issue. That's
all the time.
Issue. And
all the time.
How do we educate both sides of the table on what is going on so people can best support that student? How did you get to this place?
So I tell her I'm a mental health therapist by trade. When I was a senior, I wanted to be a teacher, and my mom is a teacher, and she was like, no. Okay. But the irony of that is that there are two of us. It's just me and my sister, and I'm the oldest. And guess what my sister is?
A teacher.
A teacher. So I was like, for a little bit, I was like, okay. But she was just like, no, I just don't think that's your thing. I don't know what your thing is, but I don't think that's your thing. So when I was a senior in high school, I took a psychology course, and I was like, there it is. I'm going to be a therapist. And so I got to school, and I had this really great course my freshman year that was like, if you want to be a therapist, you got to get a master's. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm getting a master's then. And so I've always worked with children, and I always wanted children. So I'm a certified trauma therapist for children. And my husband being military, I've worked in the juvenile justice setting. I've worked in the foster care setting. I have my own private practice. I worked in a school setting in early childhood, elementary, middle, and high school. So I've always worked with kids. My oldest son entered into the public school system. It was a predominantly white school, and he'd been in care since he was 6 weeks old. So he was used to the structure and all of that and the change and all that. And we'd have little hiccups, like the first time we'd move, and like some risk taking, and then some perfectionist thinking, all things looking back, 100% autism. Just thought it was I always tell people it's the stereotypes. So it was just a boy being a boy. He's 3. But my mom and my sister were having their own little conversations, being teachers. And they thought he was autistic. But they also were like, but when we see someone diagnosed autistic, we're not seeing that with him. So they never said anything to me, and they didn't want to offend me. And so his teacher was really great. But from the beginning, I was like, I've worked in schools. I have friends as educators, families as educators. I think you need some support. I'm not sure what that'll look like, but I want to have a meeting. Took several weeks to get a meeting. Then we got the write-ups. Then we got the phone calls. And then finally, in January of his kindergarten year, he was 5 years old. He was suspended 3 times in 2 weeks. Every time he would return back to school, he was suspended. And Dad and I noticed that he'd be suspended on a Wednesday. And like on Saturday, he would just randomly be like, Mommy and Daddy, I'm sorry, I'm bad. And we're like, what are you talking about? First of all, you are not bad.
Yeah.
Who is telling you that? Second of all, what are you talking about? He's still
Yeah.
on. After those back-to-back suspensions, the assistant principal came from a middle school. The school was only pre-K and kindergarten. Like looking back, it was just a mess. Yeah, it's like, how are you suspending him? And you only have these 2 grades. Okay. I remember asking the assistant principal. So the day I signed the paperwork, because I sent this lengthy email, I sent it to my friend who's been teaching now for 15, 16 years. At the time, she'd been teaching over a decade. And she was like, she reformatted it for me and edited it. And she was like, because she said I was being too nice. And that's why I wanted her opinion, because like, you're an educator. So let me, and she was like, you're being too nice.
Yeah.
So she reformatted it for me. I sent it to them and I was like, I want a special education evaluation. Again, still had no diagnoses. Up until this point, we had already asked for a behavior plan. We had asked, did he, again, verbally, we had asked, did he need a special education evaluation? We'd asked these things because we were like, we are seeing things we've never seen. He never hurt anyone. He never was aggressive with staff. Even when he was suspended, it was because he was like, he's throwing stuff in the classroom, but it was he was never injuring anyone physically, never attacking them, never attacking students, anything like that. So we were really confused because that was the first question all my educator friends were asking. They were like, is he getting aggressive? And they were like, this is not making any sense. And I was like, okay, I thought I was the only one. That's why I'm asking you, because you're in there. I'm not. And this is during COVID time. So I also can't be in. Yeah, it's just a mess. I send this beautiful email. They come back. We're going to get you a diagnostician, because we were in Louisiana. So they have a diagnostician and a school psychologist. So like, we're going to get you set up. The day I consented to the special education evaluation, he got suspended. The principal calls me freaking out because she wasn't there. The assistant principal suspended him. And my friend, who is a licensed clinical social worker in the school setting and who became over their like behavior piece in Kansas for their learners, was like, she can't do that.
Yeah.
You signed the paperwork, so he's protected.
Yeah.
I was like, oh. And I'm like, that makes sense, because the principal called me and was trying to figure out what was going on. It was almost like she never said it, but it's like I felt like they were going to wipe that suspension, because she just was like, I'm trying to understand what happened. Did you all decide to bring, because there had been times where I'd come up to the school and I'd be like, he's not getting back regulated. I'm just going to take him home. I'm like, no, she said he was suspended. I didn't just decide to take him like that. So I also called my husband, who was in the field, and was like, because I just asked on the way out, how many more before you kick him out? And she's, oh, with the 4th one, this was the 3rd one. With the 4th one, you have to go in front of the board and they determine if he can stay or not.
For kindergarten? When you'd already been, I'm so
sorry.
So
I called my husband crying, and he was like, I'm gonna call you back. And he got off the phone, and I was like, and he called me back within less than 30 minutes. And he was like, I need you to email me all the emails, because I am a documentation person.
Yeah.
I may not have knew to request, but in mental health, if you don't write it, it didn't happen. So I had been sending emails with concerns. So I forwarded it all to him. He sent it to the superintendent, and he said his first thought was like, who's up the chain?
Yeah.
And so his first thought was superintendent. He was like, I was like, I'm gonna find the superintendent. So we got the vice superintendent. And at the time, my husband was an officer, predominantly white area, but the school was on a base. So it was a parish school, but it was on the base. And it's predominantly white. He's Black. So there was a lot of layers to like, and the commander of the base at the time was big into education, but his kids were in high school, but he was still had a big education initiative. So there's a lot of layers to like escalating.
Yeah.
And I'd heard from other parents that they just pulled their kids out because military spouses don't work.
Yeah.
Is the narrative. And at one point it was even suggested me homeschooling him. And the school psychologist was like, but I thought you said mom works. How is she going to homeschool him? So we got a family advocate, because the base so during that time I reached out to a clinical educational psychologist who was Black. They were both Black. First meeting with him after my phone call and everything else, she was like, Mom and Dad, what do you think about autism? She had 2 Black neurodivergent children that she had raised. That's why they started their practice. So their approach was essentially supporting Black and brown children. And so I informed my husband, I'm a mental health professional. We don't just say that. So she's trying to prep us for what she thinks will. And so she worked with us. She basically took the testing from the school, reviewed their testing, and then did her additional testing. And they formally diagnosed him as autistic.
Okay.
And then the school psychologist, based on the testing and what she'd observed, which she said was clearly anxiety, clearly thought pattern, the way he was thinking, she came with the 2 papers of developmental delay and autism. But the speech therapist, which we had his reeval done when we moved, because we were about to move, and we were like, thank God, was like, there's no pragmatic concerns. And I was like, that's BS. There's absolutely pragmatic concerns.
Yeah.
And then they said he wasn't autistic because he could speak. So we just agreed to the developmental delay. We had to get the educational psychologist involved to rewrite his behavior plan because the behavior plan was strictly punitive. And she was like, how is this supposed to support him? What are they doing to support him? Everything in here is saying he will be punished, he will be punished, he will be punished. How are they supporting him? And we got that done. We moved. We had him reevaluated with his new school for speech. They also decided to reevaluate certain parts because they were like, we believe he qualifies for the autism category.
Yeah.
And they asked us if we wanted a one-on-one. And we were like, we didn't think that was possible because you just hear so much. And they were like, if you guys are kind of, no, we're absolutely comfortable with that. And then the first few months were rough because school wasn't a safe place. And I'm talking about like second day of school, I think they called us and they were like, we need to go ahead and have a meeting to go through his stuff, see how we can support him. And I just laid it all out. I was like, school is not a safe place for him. He loves to learn, but they made it this horrible place. Like we had the option to pull him out early, like to finish his kindergarten year early, and we took it. And we literally just alternated our work days, alternate our time. So the way my job was, I just had to get 40 hours in a week. So I would see how my husband's schedule was set up or where he needed to be. And then I would have him. I would go in and then he could go to his after school care during that time. And I could also get hours if my husband couldn't work with me or whatever. And so he fell in love with school again. And then he was there for 2 years, didn't want to leave, of course. And then my husband went from active duty to reserve. So we moved to where we are now. And first he was doing great. So we're like, he doesn't need a one-on-one, but he had told me he thought he needed a one-on-one longer.
Okay.
And that was my first, didn't listen. And then later we were all like, he needs a one-on-one, but they were like, we have to hire one. So we just put in his IEP and then they did suspend him. So he got suspended twice. The second time he got suspended, my husband was like, absolutely not. We were hit by the hurricane.
Okay.
So they were out of school for like almost 2 months. I want to say it was like at least a month they were out of school.
Okay.
And the counties went back differently. And when we went back was when he was having issues because he's been out of school. And it disrupted his routine and his flow and everything. And they actually hadn't had all their staff back yet. So they'd actually suspended him because they didn't have staff to support him. So my husband went and got him, came home because I had IEP meetings and whatever. And my husband doesn't get mad. And he was pissed. And he was like, yeah, I don't like that. If he's coming home, don't call me up there. I come up there. He's calm. He's perfectly fine. He wants to stay. And now he's fighting me because he doesn't want to leave. And you suspended him because basically you don't have the staff to support him. And so it was like so you want me to handle it? And he was like, yeah, I want you to handle it. So in Georgia, we have a special education help desk. And I wrote them once already because my son has a sleep disorder. And so every school he'd been in, they'd allowed us to just say, hey, he had a rough sleep night. He's going to come in later. Here, we were getting a letter from the Department of Children and Families. Like, you could get a letter from the Department of Children and Family Services. We didn't get that letter. We got the letter saying basically like he's been tardy and if this continues. Mind you, they knew about his sleep disorder and all those things. So I contacted the help desk and I was like, I'm not entirely sure how to handle this because I never had this issue with another district because he has a diagnosed sleep disorder. And so then that's when it was like, oh, we're going to do a health plan. Then this suspension happened. So then I reached out to the help desk again and I said, I don't understand what I'm supposed to do here because we have it documented in his IEP. He needs a one-on-one. So you don't have the staff, so you're suspending him. I'm not quite sure as a parent how I'm supposed to handle that. I had him in OT already. We got him in coding, which he loves for that social piece and to handle things when they're frustrated. Like and he's been in therapy before. So I'm like, we're doing the things.
Right.
There's nothing else we can do. And so then they forwarded it to the special education director and included me on it and said, yes, answer mom's questions and mine, because I'm not understanding what's happening. The next day we showed up and they had pulled a para from one of the rooms to be his one-on-one. And it's one of those things where you're like, I hate that, like, for the parent and for that classroom.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, it gets to a point where you're like, I have to do what I have to do for my child.
Yeah. And when you're working in school districts, that colloquialism of the squeaky wheel gets the oil. But I saw kids who needed a squeaky wheel in their life and didn't have one, and they weren't getting what they needed. And then other kids who did have a squeaky wheel who were getting way more than I thought that they really needed to be successful. Because sometimes we can overhelp kids a little bit, and they don't need all of the things. They need to start to have some independence and some autonomy. And I've seen that side of things too, where it's no, we want all of the things that we could possibly have to support this child. And you end up smothering them.
I had a situation with my own child, where I was just like, so my youngest, when we moved here, they were considering so in Georgia, we have what are called ASD classrooms. But classrooms are not autistic. They just may have higher support needs or social emotional needs. And my youngest he's ADHD and has a speech delay. So he definitely needed that emotional regulation piece. So I told him from the beginning, I said, my oldest can be in gen ed, like full time. I was like, to be honest, I was like, especially with a one-on-one, because even his teacher was like, yeah, I have no issues when she's doing group instruction and things like that. It's the independent instruction because of the pressure he puts on himself and he gets dysregulated and then he struggles. She was like, but he never disrupts while I'm teaching. He always participates. That is not an issue at all. And my youngest, on the other hand, he would have a lot of that dysregulation throughout. And so I was like, I think he needs a smaller setting and could go into gen ed. And I think my oldest can be in gen ed. Of course, they were like, well, the oldest is the one who's autistic. So then a few weeks in, like actually a week in with my youngest, they were like, yeah, so we're going to put him in a smaller setting.
Oh, thank you for listening.
And they were like, Mom, and to her credit, she was like, so in our district, you have the special ed teacher, then she attends all the IEP meetings.
Okay.
And she's over scheduling and all that. Then we have there's a director, then a person, then the special ed teacher. So I can't remember the names. And so that person that finalizes things is the one who is like, Mom was right. But also what they did was my youngest had been going to specials with another gen ed class.
Okay.
And they ended up realizing that she was a better fit for him. So she became his gen ed teacher for his core subjects too. And so at the end of his meeting and my oldest, I was like, they both need teachers next year, like how they had this year. And the teachers in the classroom told me, they were like, you didn't hear this from us, but, and this goes back to what you're talking about with that, like, I feel like it's like a privilege piece, like that squeaky wheel gets the grease. They were like, we know for a fact that they're already making schedules and that if you email the principal, she will accommodate, because there are plenty of parents who should not be accommodated, that all they do is send a nice little email about who they want their child to be with, and that's who their child goes with. I was like, oh. And they were like, but you didn't hear that from us. Just letting you know. So I, being who I am, I'm very fact-based. So it's not just, I don't even know what teacher they would go to. I don't know the next grade's teachers. But what I sent in the email was essentially, I mentioned all the people that had supported them and how they'd supported them. And was like, they need to be successful. They need people like that next year. And I basically put in the caveat of, I'm not expecting a reply or anything. I'm just sending this email. And I know that she saw it because the teachers then told me at the end of the year, they were like, thank you for your kind words. And they shared the email with us. But yeah, so thinking about what you were saying, I'm like, but my husband always says too, even when we were going through with our son, he's thinking about all the families that did not have that quote unquote status to do that. You're a whole mental health professional who's worked with kids. So you were like, this is not right. But there's so many that won't know that or feel comfortable. Like I'm a pretty outspoken person, and especially don't confirm that I'm right. And so they're not being forced to actually figure out how to help him. And she was like, that's a problem. And I'm like, okay, so I'm not just, because I was like, it's getting a little out of control. Like you're calling, like I was getting called. He'd been there less than 30 minutes and they were calling me.
Oh.
Yeah. So I'm like, basically and I dropped him off every day. So basically, I dropped him off, dropped his brother off at daycare, and then I would get a phone call. And I was like,
You haven't even had time to implement any strategies or do anything or help
and his
him.
teacher was great with him. And so looking back, I didn't realize either that she wasn't even getting to see him because she would express that too. She's like, if he can just get to my classroom,
Yeah, then
we
he'll
can
be okay.
usually,
Yeah.
and no one else intervenes because that happened a few times too, where she got him back regulated based on conversations we had on what worked for him. And
Yeah.
then a veteran staff who felt like she maybe wasn't doing a lot of structure or whatever would come step in and then he'd be more dysregulated. And she was like, just leave him alone. I had it. He was fine.
Yeah. It's amazing to me how well our kids know where they are loved and accepted and where they are not. And how so quickly in classrooms, even within one school, going to music class versus library versus this versus that, how differently they can respond. And it's one thing that, and we have mental health in our background as OTs, but when people are like, oh, they're a behavior kid, no, they are communicating how they feel with their behavior. This is so much bigger than this, and you can't just write them off like this. But also, it's so frustrating for parents in seeing this when you don't have eyes in the classroom for you. Like, this is a whole nother job that some moms take on and do, and some moms don't even know that they need to be doing. The range of what is provided and what is offered and what is done, so crazy to me. I'm so glad that there are people like you who come alongside and help them and educate, because it's so hard when you're a part of the IEP team to do that, because I have definitely been, hey, we don't have time to explain these things in the IEP meeting. And I remember saying, this is a big deal for them. They don't do this every day. We do this almost every day of the school year. We see all of this. And one of the school districts I work with, because I worked as a traveler for a while, and so I got to see a lot of different schools and states in a short amount of time. And wow, did they do things differently and interpret things very differently. And yeah.
My son being military, I always tell people we've had 3 different experiences, so to speak. So his first school was on the military base, but it's considered a parish school because they have parishes instead of counties in Louisiana. So it was still very much a quote unquote civilian school. Then we moved to Georgia, but we went to a Dodea school on the military base. So Dodea School is a Department of Defense Education Act school, and they are funded by the Department of Defense. That's where they get their funding from. So when you come into them, they have their own system and program for IEPs and things like that. So they hold what's called a case meeting, and you review the child's history and what you felt was working in their previous school at their IEP, what you felt wasn't. They do their 30-day, like a lot of schools do, their 30-day evaluation and go from there. Then we moved to where we are now, which is a county school and district school. So again, even though we're in the same state, Georgia's Department of Education is different than the Department of Defense Education at schools. So we've been in essentially 3 different systems and 2 different states. And I say that because my children are in elementary school, so they're still in a very young part of their educational career. But we have definitely seen the varying in just services being available. And even my son's first school was it was only pre-K, or what they call LA4, and kindergarten. So even his first elementary school wasn't a full-blown K through 4, or I know there's some that's K through 6, or it was just 2 grades. So we've definitely seen a variety of experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's even as a professional, navigating those systems, it's really hard to learn all of that. And if you don't come from that background, it's hard to know. But I think the one thing that I tell parents on this side is just ask. Just start asking questions, get curious. Yes, it is going to take a little bit more energy and engagement on your part. But if something doesn't feel right to you, if something feels off, please start asking questions, because I think we've been so taught to dissociate from that intuition. And especially for the parents, I work with a lot of moms who have actually worked with a couple in the DODEA because they're not qualifying for services, but they know that their kid needs OT. But how do we do that? And so I coach parents and give them that support, then they can implement things. So it's not a traditional occupational therapy model. But if especially for the moms who grew up not knowing that they actually needed some accommodations themselves, and they're on this journey of figuring out, like, wait a minute, these are all the things that I struggled with as a kid, but I was told or done, I had to do this, and I didn't get this support. And it's such an interesting journey when you are unraveling your own story while writing your child's story right alongside of it.
Yeah, I 100%, because how my own diagnosis came about was my son and I have always been two sides of the same coin, and we've always done a lot of things. And looking back, I was like, I always tell people it's two things. One, I had a stereotyped view of what autism presented. I think you can't learn or unlearn or grow if you don't acknowledge that. And two, we're like the same person. So it was just like things, and my husband even says, he's like, yeah, things that he would do that I was like, that's different. Oh, but she does that. So like he just gets it from his mom. It was like, so that's how we just saw it. There was no, and then the other side of it was my son was internal, but I always talk about being a therapist too. Me and my husband created a safe enough space that he can externalize a lot of the things that were once internal.
Mm.
And when I was growing up, I'm part of that generation where we just internalized. And I tell everyone, like, my parents had me and my sister when they were young. So because of that, I was like, I grew up with my parents, but they would talk about things, but you had to bring it to them. If I'm sad or something, they're not like, just like, oh, she's sad. They'd be like, you okay? What's wrong? So that we would talk about those things, but it had to be brought to them.
Yeah.
And I would say that's, to me, like just the generations growing. Like, I feel like they were the generation where their parents were like, be seen, not heard. We were the generation we could be seen and heard, but be respectful. Like, don't cross the
This
boundaries.
is your box that you get
Yes.
to live in. Please.
You're still a
do
child. Stay calm. And then our generation is more like the go to therapy and let's get a diagnosis because that's giving me answers I didn't have. And so after his diagnosis and we moved, I then sought out a female psychologist who had experience with female autistics, particularly. And then I got my diagnosis. And so then that just, like my husband said, now we have like a swing in our living room and we have a trampoline in our dining room. And he was like cleaning up the house the other day and he was like, tell me you have neurodivergent children. And I was like, because like you walk in our house and you just see it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really cool to walk alongside. I have a couple moms I'm working with right now of, okay, how are we? Because it's hard because you're trying to undo the patterns that you have learned, not because our parents were wrong or bad or anything like that. Like you said, each generation has their own piece that they're playing in this. And because they did their piece, now this is the piece that we are doing, right? So now, okay, here's where I am. These are the things that are coming up. How do I shift that? Because if we don't create enough space for us to deal with those things as the mom, as the parent, we just react the same way our parents did. And so we continue that same cycle versus changing it and moving a step forward. It's hard because you have got to have enough nervous system regulation yourself. You have got to know those tools in order to create that space to hold that space for your child. And that is not something that we were taught, but it's something that I see a lot of us seeking. How do we do this differently? How do I stay regulated and grounded in who I am, knowing that I also need accommodations in some areas. I need support, and that's okay. And then still hold the space for my child and show up as best I can. Not with a perfectionist model. I'm going to mess up. I mess up quite frequently. How do I repair that? How do I model grace for myself so that when she messes up, doesn't then carry over that same self-talk that I used to do so terribly? That's a hard place while we're doing IEPs, while we're doing therapies, while we're doing school. on top of all the things that we already have. It's a lot.
That's what I say that's the hardest for me is that one of the things I always say is that I saw a quote one time where it was like the reason why a lot of parents, and they were mentioning moms in particular, are late diagnosed is because their children activate all the pieces that they didn't recognize were part of their neurodivergence. And I was like, I 100% believe that because I was like, it's a running joke in my family of I'm gonna nap and it's gonna be a lovely nap. If you disrupt me from any type of sleep, I'm a monster. I love my solitude and then I'll be very talkative and engaging, but then I will like wrap in a cocoon afterwards. And when you have a child, like I've never been a big hugger. I've never been big on physical affection ever. And then you have this tiny human and I think what was interesting is I feel like I have two children and I feel, and they're very different, but very similar. And in their differences, they both ignited different things for me. My youngest is a cuddler, a kisser, a hugger, and I love you. I
Oh,
want to be under you. And I'm like,
my nervous system is
oh.
like, just hearing you say that, knowing where you just.
And my oldest, I noticed that and then my husband pointed that out too. He gets his spurts like you do. And that he'll be very like in his room, or if you like go, he'll be like, don't touch me, leave me alone. Like I want to be, and then he'll be like, I want to be up under you. And that's how I get my spurts of I think feeling disconnected and then seeking that out. And it can be very confusing, right? Because then it's okay. Then once we get that feel, so to speak, it's like, okay, I'm done. I'm good.
Yeah.
But they both, my oldest was very, and looking back, me and my sister, like it was very sensory. We didn't recognize it, like changing of the diaper, screaming bloody murder. And you're just like one time in the bathroom, this lady like knocked on the door and I was already dysregulated because trying to change. And I was like, if you don't leave us alone, it's just like, I'm just changing his diaper and it sounds like I'm hurting him.
Yeah.
And then my youngest was just like, cool. He was quiet. He did like just so chill. But then when the walking started, the youngest was in everything. Like we had to gate the Christmas tree and we had to do all the things. And my oldest, I'd be like, you don't touch mommy's Christmas tree. And it was like, okay. And this is at like 1 year old. Like he was like, okay. She said, don't touch it. I don't touch it. And never touches the tree again. And so it was just like where meanwhile my youngest is throwing stuff over the gate and he's toy because he's thinking I'm gonna let him go touch it because he has to get the toy. And I'm like, no, I'm just gonna get the toy for you. You're not still not touching the tree. So I just saw that quote and I was just like, that's very true because I think we have this time where, I mean, especially if you're living by yourself, like you have the ability to accommodate yourself.
Yeah.
And that's also why, not to get on that tangent, but just to briefly mention it, why I dislike when people are like, how are they going to function in the real world? Because people don't realize that all their intricacies and particular ways and things that they like and jobs they select and things they choose not to do or participate in is them accommodating themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. That is living in the real world.
Yeah. I'm like, you know how you're like, oh, I don't like my stuff touching.
Yeah.
That's accommodating. You're like, oh, I don't hold hands.
Yeah. Or how you flick your pen or you tap your foot when you're in a long, boring meeting. And yet we expect a first grader to sit still and keep your eyes looking at the teacher and your feet flat on the ground. But we can't do the same thing.
And you walk away from conversations that bore you or you don't enjoy, or you cut them short, or you're in your mind playing something else because you don't want to hear it. But when they say, because again, we think about that filter they don't have yet. And so they're just like, stop talking. I don't like that. And it's like they're being rude. Like one of the things I've enjoyed is watching my parents adjust. And I think that's been interesting because they are very open because I'm like them. So I'm like, you can adjust or not see them. Like, I'm that kind of person. But I never had to be that way with them because they have always been like, they're your kids. Yeah. And we will adjust accordingly. And so I had to tell my dad one time when my youngest gets really dysregulated, he'll say, stop talking. And my dad is like, who are you talking? I'm disciplining you right now. And you're telling me to stop talking? And so I had to tell him, like, he's saying that because he doesn't want us to talk to him because he's upset and it's making it worse.
Yeah.
So this is a way to handle that. And so then my dad's okay, because I had to take a pause because I was like, who are you talking to? But then he adjusted and he's, I see what you mean. Yeah, he definitely was saying that but it's like you also have to have people that are supports that are open to that too.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard. Sometimes it's not one conversation, but it's multiple conversations for a period of time to get to that place. And that's not very easy. But one thing I ask everyone at the end is if you had to go back, so that first time you were going through this with your oldest and you were figuring all this stuff out, if you could go back and give advice to that mom at that time in that space, what would you say to her knowing what you know now?
Don't do it alone. Don't do it alone. I'm getting a little emotional. Wow. Me and my husband definitely, and I've said this from day one, we are always a team. And professionally, he had a lot going on during that time, and he was still giving of himself to us as a team. But we were a team as parents. We didn't know what was happening. We didn't know what was going on, and we were tackling it on our own. And then some things that I felt weren't embarrassing, but I had questions, like embarrassing as in questions, the person's going to question me as a parent, I would share with my family of getting their insight. But I didn't know until my son got an IEP that two of my best friends' children had. I didn't know that. And it was because, and their children are older than my children, but it was because we just never talked about it. It never came up. It never, whatever. And so during that time, I found out later I went through a period of burnout. And it was really because I was trying to do it alone. And I was shouldering, and I talk about this a lot in my professional side, of the shame and guilt of both being his parent and being a professional who works with children, who's not able to help my own child. Because a lot of the first school's questions were constantly, will you work with children? What do you tell people to do? And looking back, I was like, that was so inappropriate because I wasn't in the classroom. It was COVID time. I wasn't allowed to be in the classroom. And he was my child. So whenever you're contacting me, you're dysregulating me about what's happening with him. And then I'm coming in there and I'm supposed to be regulated and support. That doesn't make sense. And I know that now. So, excuse me, I would say just don't do it alone. Like you have people, if you have people, and if you don't have people, there are people on the internet. There's community everywhere where you can find people who are going through the exact same thing that you are. And sometimes I've come across families, not where I am, but in other places that they realize they're in the same place. They're going through the same issues. So just don't do it alone. You don't have to. For all of its negative, that's the benefit of the internet.
Do you work with people outside of your state, for people listening, if anyone's curious?
Yeah, so I work in all 50 states.
Okay.
I do IEP reviews. I attend IEP meetings virtually, and I do what's called advocacy and consultation. So I have some families that hire me just to write their parent input statements and to brainstorm and prepare for meetings. And then I have other ones that hire me to attend meetings. But I have families right now in over 30 states, but I work in all 50 states.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode with Destiny. Before I close out this session, I know it's been a long one compared to what we normally have, but I just want to say this. If you are in the thick of IEP season or SEN season or whatever it is where you live, what it's called, I just am sending you the biggest deep pressure hug, because regardless of whether it's your first time through this or your fifth time through it, it is really challenging to advocate in systems that aren't built for neurodivergent kids to thrive. I work in school-based therapies in the US, and this last month working with some of my families, it's been nonstop meetings for some of them, and that it's really hard and it takes a toll. There's a lot of stress, there's a lot of preparation and second guessing, there's emotional exhaustion from sitting in the meeting and explaining things and not feeling heard. There are 3 takeaways that I would love to leave you with from this episode, is that oftentimes schools will put it back on the parent to carry that invisible load. And as a neurodivergent parent or a disabled child, you carry a huge invisible load, and people will continue to expect you to carry it. And so, especially if you don't know the system, if you are very emotionally involved in this and you are having trouble regulating your own system, get help. Please don't do this by yourself. Your regulation sets the tone for this meeting more than you know. And when you can show up calm, assertive, and grounded in your knowing, not just in your knowledge of what it is to parent your child, but knowing that this also does not determine the rest of your child's life. don't forget to take care of yourself through all this. When you have so many things going on and you're regulating for a child who's having trouble in that educational setting, it can feel like I am the last person who is going to get to take care of. I have everyone else to take care of. When you are regulated, you will advocate better. People will respond to you better. Your child will respond better. So don't push self-care to the sidelines. And Destiny said in this, when she has an IEP for her own children, she will take a day and try not to schedule anything else that day. So whether you get a nap in, a walk, turn off your phone for a while, call your best friend, find something that works for you, delegate some things off of your plate. And as Destiny said it so beautifully, don't do this alone. Find your people, whether you need professional help or you need a community of other moms who can say, hey, I've been there too, and you will get to the other side. Please reach out to someone. There's no shame in needing support. And if you need resources, let me know. Drop me an email and I will connect you. We can even chat about sensory strategies for IEPs if that's an issue. Definitely check the links for Dr. Destiny Huff and her services and some of the resources that she has. Until next time, give yourself some grace, take a deep breath, and know you are doing an amazing job, Mom.
That's it for this week's episode of the Sensory Savvy Mama. I hope you're walking away with some actionable tips and a renewed sense of hope for your journey. Remember, you are not alone in this journey. Your child is amazing, and you are the perfect mom for them. If you love this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. It helps other moms like you find our community and lets us know what you want to hear. If you want to connect further, you can find us on Instagram or subscribe to our newsletter for inspiration, exclusive sensory tips, behind-the-scenes glimpses, and so you don't miss out on any new episodes. We are all in this together, Mama. I love you, and I'm so proud of you. One last thing before we go. While I am an occupational therapist, I am not your child's occupational therapist. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. As the parent, you know your child best. So please use your best judgment and consult with your child's healthcare providers before exploring any of the strategies or ideas shared here. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out.